Hello and welcome to Live Dreams Presidential Protection Edition. We were going to do nightmares, and there isn't much of a worse nightmare than a nation potentially losing a leader, past, present, or future. And so decided to make a shift. Also, if you haven't caught, I did my a live last night. You can catch it on Rumble. You can get the link on the YouTube channel. But it's pretty important. And the reason is, one of the reasons why we started everything we're doing in spiritual intelligence is because I started about 5 years ago studying the dreams of former presidents. And in the dreams of former presidents, we saw assassination dreams related to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, President Garfield. We've gotten numerous dreams related to the assassination of JFK. And so if you look at the whole landscape of everything that's being said in dreams, particularly to presidents, the loudest thing, which means the thing it seems like God most often talks about that we know of in recorded history, is presidential mortality and attempts on the president's life. And there probably isn't something more that we care about as far as an intelligence piece or a national security piece than guarding and protecting, doing what we can to help and guard and protect the president, his family, his running mate, of either party at all. And so it takes us back to Nebuchadnezzar and the dream of the tree, and how Daniel shook when he got the bad news that he might have to spend 7 years crawling on the ground like an animal. But such is the nature of spiritual intelligence. So that being the case, I wanted to give a historical primer. I go into the dreams and the visions of Abraham Lincoln. We talk about the Garfield incident related to his assassination and ultimate death, as well as the dream that he had and a conversation that he had with Lincoln's son related to spiritual intelligence, and then an update on some of the things that we've seen related to the Trump incident this last Saturday. So, but again, in light of that, we felt the need to pivot, and we felt the need to have a conversation about presidential protection and dreams related to presidents, shooter events, protection, things like that, because obviously it's front and center, both in the spiritual intelligence and prophetic world, but also in the world around us. So, hi, Janet. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks for being on. It's good to see you.
Yeah. It seems like I a lot of times get on when there's stuff about presidents and stuff.
Yes.
So that must be my thing, my niche, maybe.
It could be. It's a good niche to have. Janet's been with us for what, like 3 years now?
Yeah, since the beginning.
Since the beginning.
Yeah.
She's been trained through all of our courses. She's an incredible analyst and a researcher, and just a trusted colleague to work with. And so it's always good to showcase not only what I do, but also what my people do. This has never been a one-man show. It never will be. It's always about a team. And that's one of the things, if you guys have ever heard me say anything about the new movement in the prophetic called spiritual intelligence, it's this. It's that we have a team of people that we work together with. So let us know where you're calling in from or where you're watching in from. Hey, Kim, how are you? Hey, Holly. Tanya from the UK. Hey, Jill. Pam. Mary Susan. We're like a family here. We're a big community. A lot of people know one another, even just from the comments. Interesting. I've heard somebody comment on this, Kim, about Donald Trump being a new man, totally different countenance and walk, prophecy fulfilled. It's interesting, and I guess we're going to go there right away and have a conversation. But probably one of the most famous pictures that came out of the whole Saturday event is this picture, and it's the picture, obviously, of Trump on his knees, and it looks like he has his hands crossed, and obviously the blood on his face. We certainly don't wish this upon anybody, but we also do know that God can use absolutely anything to be able to draw somebody closer to themselves. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way this was necessary or anything. I'm saying God spared this man's life.
Mm-hmm.
Let's vote now. I think the whole nation might be red, but anyway, and it's really not about one party versus the other. It's, there's corruption in both parties. There's all kinds of things going on at the national level that we're seeing, that there's been a shift, but we're still at war. Good word, Christy. Connecticut. All right. Yes, it changed him. So thankful. Yes. His shoes came off like Moses. I heard that it was because they hit him so hard when they went to tackle him, basically, when Secret Service covered down on him, that they knocked his shoes off. And I love it when he says, "Hey, let me get my shoes before you take them off," which I think was really interesting. But yeah, I didn't think of that holy moment kind of scenario. I think it's interesting. I wanted to get on and say something. And this, I'm just going to be honest with you. I always struggle with this. I have been, most of you know, I was a rescue worker at Ground Zero after 9/11. I was at the Sandy Hook shooting event 24 hours after it happened to go there and pray. But I also I used to be a news junkie. And so I used to watch the news. And when Princess Diana's car accident happened, I just stayed up for like 8 hours and watched this thing unfold and the story change. And the same thing for the Olympic bombing. And so I've seen, I was the Persian Gulf War. So I've been involved in historic events, but I've also seen them unfold in the news cycle. And it's interesting that people tend to get emotional. They tend to have these creative outbursts where they want to say this or that, or they have this opinion or that opinion, different things. And I think it's something that I want to respond as a leader, particularly in the area of spiritual intelligence. There's been a plethora of people that have come out and say, "I prophesied this, we prayed against it, this happened, that happened." And what we're doing is we're looking all of that together collectively, not what one person, you heard about the guy that had the dream, Brandon Biggs, I believe his name is, where the bullet went by Trump's head and blew his eardrum. That's great. That's one data point. Chris Reed had a word about an attempt on the president's life, prayed against it. That's another data point. So there's been a lot of pieces and many others. I think Amanda Grace, possibly Julie Green, multiple other. I think Charlie Shamp had something that he put out. I'm not endorsing or not endorsing any of these people. I'm saying one of the things that we do in spiritual intelligence is we try to take a broad swath of what's happening in the area of spiritual intelligence. And so we collect dreams. We hear what God, yes, our prayers work, don't stop. We hear what God is saying. Hi, Ash. Good to see you. Dawn. And we want to look at a broad swath of what he's saying. And so part of that and part of our mandate to do that is we hold a position on the wall that I think is interesting and unique. I don't know anybody else that's looking at like the top 65, 70 plus known prophetic voices and dreamers in this country and around the world and collecting the words that we get. And so we have a database that we can look up, everything from, obviously Kim Clement, he has a database there. People are saying, well, there's words there, there's dreams here, there's this, that. And one of the other things that we haven't really talked about much, for the first time in years, I had a nightmare, July 13th, 24, woke up at 3:45 a.m., but it wasn't a Trump dream. But I thought for a second because of the number 45 and the time when I woke up. Why don't you hop on and share that dream with us? Grace, we'd love to hear it. This is one of the things that we talked about, is the idea that you can have a dream that's a warning dream, but it not necessarily be about an attempt on the president's life. Lincoln had a dream the morning that he was shot, and it was a dream that he had many times of a ship passing a dock, quickly approaching a distant shore. And he turned to he turned to Grant, General Grant, and he said, "Have we heard from Sherman?" And Sherman said, "No, the war ended 2 days ago. Why would we hear from Sherman?" He said, "Because," he looked at the Secretary of the Navy and he said, "Well, Bob, it's kind of in your department. I had a dream last night of the ship moving across, the waters to a distant shore. And every time I have that dream, it means it portends, it's a national omen that something nationally important is going to happen that day." And then he gives examples. I had it before: Gettysburg, Fredericksburg, Antietam, Bull Run, and lists a couple others, depending on the version of the story that you read. I read the version from Recollections of Abraham Lincoln, 1847 to 1865, written by his best friend and his partner, and also his only bodyguard, Ward Hill Layman. So this is a firsthand account, published in 1865. I find it to be probably the most credible version of the story, because he was there when this happened in the cabinet meeting that morning. And Grant looked up at him in horror and said, "Sir, we didn't win all of those battles." And he said, "I didn't say we won. I said it didn't portend a victory, but it showed that an event of national importance was going to happen." Well, if you look up April 14th, 1865, it's so loud in history, the assassination of Lincoln, that you're probably not going to find any other historical event that happened that day. I'm hopping on a road trip, but I have had the following visions. Okay, cool. We'll look for your visions. So what are your thoughts, Janet?
What are my thoughts? Actually, I was thinking about Lincoln before we got on here. I was trying to find, because Ulysses Grant's wife, her name was Julia, was a dreamer. And I was trying to find if she had any dreams about the assassination. She didn't really have dreams per se. She had some premonitions, which is one of the reasons why they didn't go to the theater. But she did have some other dreams in her life. So I just found that kind of interesting, because they really wanted to assassinate Grant as well. So
yeah, it was a whole conspiracy. They tried to take out the vice president. I think the Secretary of War. I think, who was it? The vice president? Somebody else was also injured that night.
Yeah.
And had a struggle.
I can't remember, but I'd have to look it up. But it's just interesting that she was very much a dreamer. So, she had dreamt about other things prior, earlier in their life that actually, a lot of them came true. So it was just kind of interesting that she was a dreamer too. So.
Yeah. I saw somebody talk about it. I think it was Troy Black. He had a dream that Kevin Zadai walked up to him and pinched his right ear and said, like, "Listen up," or something like that. I'm probably butchering the story. But again, it's one of probably 12 data points that we've seen. And by the way, feel free to send us. Do me a favor, though. If you send me a video like on YouTube or whatever, don't send me a 2-hour video. Send me a video and say, "Watch the dream between 17 minutes and 50 seconds and 20 minutes, 1 second." Because I don't have time to watch all the videos that people send me. But if I know that there's a nugget in there, I don't need to hear the story, the before and after, the guitar playing, the prayer, the worship. I just want to know the dream. Just give me the raw data intel. If somebody had a dream, I don't even necessarily need to know what they pontificated means, because often we see at a different depth than what a lot of people are putting out. But I just need to know the dream. Yeah. And so if you find that and you want to send us something, the best place to do that, by the way, and we're actively looking right now for dreams related to what could be potentially related to this event, or what happens next, which we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Go to dreamlifedakota.com. On dreamlifedakota.com, at the very top, it says "Submit a Dream." And it asks you things like times, dates, locations. Where were you? Don't put "I was at home." Put "I was at home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania," because that might be significant, because the shooting happened in Butler. So you might get a piece of intel living in the state of Pennsylvania. Again, I haven't been in Pennsylvania in probably 5 or 10 years until 2 weeks ago, where I stayed in the oldest home in Pennsylvania. I went to the Brandywine Historic Center and the battlefield. I toured several different houses, including the battlefield headquarters of George Washington. And then I went to Valley Forge and I toured the battlefield headquarters of the encampment at Valley Forge of George Washington. And Ash called me and said, "I feel like you need to get up to the highest high place there and declare some things." and I walked through a church, or through the parking lot of a church. It was after hours. And I just so happened to meet the priest of the church, an Episcopal church. He happens to be from Tennessee, from Nashville, Tennessee. So we hit it off on the whole Nashville thing. And I said, is there any way I can get up into the bell tower? And he goes, well, it's like 200 stairs. You want to climb? And I'm like, yeah. And so after hours, when the church was closed, he takes me up into the very highest building in all of the Valley Forge encampment. And we were able to pray and release some things up there. But, Dutch Sheets has talked numerous times about the angels on reserve at Valley Forge, and go to give him 15 and just search Valley Forge. And there's like 3 pages of things that come up about Valley Forge. But because of the 5 Giants dream, and particularly because of the third vision of George Washington, which he had at Valley Forge, I felt the need to go there right now in this season, this summer. So it's really interesting that I went there, that I released some things, that I directed some angelic activity there as well. And then there's a presidential assassination attempt mere miles away. Butler is next to Valley Forge, but it's in Pennsylvania. And it's, again, I'm normally not even in that state. So these are all things. They're all data points that we want to examine, we want to look at, as well as, of course, the dreams that all of you are having, which, again, is why we're here. 2 times it talks about the blood on the right ear. Yeah, I would love somebody to look that up in Scripture. Vicki, I don't know if you want to do that or not, but if somebody could look that reference up in Scripture, it's kind of hard to do those searches while I'm managing everything here on StreamYard. But I wonder what Scripture says about the blood on the right ear. I do think it has something to do with hearing. Yes, I've seen the emphasis on Ephesians 6:11 about the armor of God. I think that's interesting. I also think 7:13 is probably really interesting. I don't have a picture of myself to speak to you about my dream online. My daughter had a nightmare the same day. Can you send that in, please? We would love. Again, people may have had dreams or nightmares or dreams of national importance, and they don't know what they mean. If you had them that day, I mean, I reached out to a couple of friends. Andrew Whalen was one. We all know what an incredible dreamer. I've worked with him on other stuff before. And I just said, hey, man, did you have any dreams on the 13th, even if it wasn't about the president or about a shooting? Did you have a dream of national importance? Because, again, I'm looking at the historical evidence of what happened to Lincoln. On the morning that he was shot, he had a dream that he knew something of national importance would happen that day. And, of course, now we know it to be his death. But I do think it's interesting. I don't believe, again, in this case of Abraham Lincoln, and by the intelligence that we've seen so far, I don't think that there was enough intelligence. I don't believe that God released the intelligence. Yeah, Andrew's cool. I don't believe that God released enough intelligence for us to predict or times, dates, locations to provide a warning to people that would have been in a position to do something. By the way, we're also looking up dreams on Trump, even if it's not related to this event. We're looking up dreams about the Secret Service. I have multiple dreams about the Secret Service. I worked as a volunteer with the Secret Service at the Republican National Convention in 1996. And it was the Republican convention because that happened to be the one that was in San Diego, where I lived at the time, and I was in the military. And it was a really cool opportunity to see what happens at a national political convention. It was amazing. So I'm familiar with what's going on in Milwaukee and what's happening this week. And it's a political time. It's a highly charged political time. It can be a divisive time in our nation. And so, again, what I wanted to do was steer the conversation to spiritual intelligence. Virginia, I had a dream of President Trump and Melania in a penthouse apartment. It keeps me baffled. We'd love to see that. If you want to come on and share that, that would be great. Yeah, it's on the other side of the state. Butler is the map, and the dots that are being connected in this puzzle are amazing. Yes, and there's so much more. I believe there's pieces that people are putting out, fragments, and typically what's happening is people put them out from, hey, I had this dream, or if they're a prophetic voice, they're like, I saw this and I prophesied this and then we prayed, but it's one data point. And what I want to do is provide, here's 20 data points. Here's dreams that we had 4 years ago. Here's things that we've had. There was another event that, again, we don't talk about very often, where we had the honor and the privilege of actually providing a warning to the presidential security team related to attempt on the president's life. It was years ago, but it's interesting because that dream talks about an inside job and it mentions the Secret Service. It's really interesting because right now the Secret Service is under a lot of scrutiny and a microscope, and people are alleging everything from Iran was behind this, which could be a relation to the Five Giants dream, to the idea that it was an inside job, which again, we've seen in other dreams. If you're familiar, and I know I'm talking super fast, and if this is over your head, don't worry about it. But if you're familiar with the dreams of Dana Coverstone, he had a dream in, I think it was 2020 or 2021, called the Conestoga Wagon Dream, where Trump was on his knees on a platform with a knife to his throat. And he jumps up from that, and he might have actually had blood on his neck. I forget that part. And then he gets escorted by the Secret Service and rushed into the presidential limo. But what's interesting is what happens next. What happens next in the dream is there's three people that are very much on the political scene involved in a power struggle on the Democratic Party that catastrophe happens. That's all I'm going to say. But it's pretty incredible. And so I'm looking at that. I've reached out to Dana and said, hey, are you watching this? We need to have a conversation in the next couple of days. I'm glad you're watching the rally. I think people should watch the convention too. Trump didn't have, did Trump have a loyal butler? Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Well, can a butler be, like the equivalent of a cupbearer? Do you think?
Well, that's what people are saying. I don't think in the Bible he's called the butler. I think he's called the cupbearer.
Right. Because I have seen some dreams where there's mentions of cupbearers too with Trump. In fact, I had one where his cupbearer was with him, and they both got shot. But it was like after everything had settled down. They weren't expecting it, so it just came out of nowhere from the ground. So that's why the whole idea of butler, is that the same as a cupbearer? I don't know. Possibly.
Pretty interesting.
It is interesting.
Convention was awesome. So many great speakers. It feels good to hear the truth for a change. Interesting.
I did notice Trump was very emotional, and he's not usually quite that emotional. I mean, not like he was excited, but like he was very, I don't want to use humbled, but like he wanted to just cry, but he knew he couldn't. You could tell he was holding that back. So he was definitely very
Did he
emotional.
speak already? I thought he speaks Thursday.
Well, he came in. Well, he hasn't actually spoken, but he did come into the arena last night. And they showed his face, and I mean, the crowd was just in an uproar and yelling, "Fight, fight, fight!" and USA, USA. And it looked like it almost brought him to tears, just in a very humbling way. So, we were talking earlier about, has this experience humbled him? Well, possibly. We can't read his mind, but his face, he sure seemed very, different than he has in the past. So,
wow, I love this. Thanks for posting these, Linda. Exodus 29:19, the blood on the right ear is part of purifying Aaron and his sons for service. And Diana adds, Wanda Alger quoted Exodus 21:6, he shall bring him to the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl, and then that he will be his servant for life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
That is good stuff. It's hard. It's a hard thing to find out people you thought were your friends are trying to kill you. It's a little cryptic. I don't know if they know who's behind it. There's never in a million years am I going to buy the lone wolf story. Still don't buy it on the JFK thing. They still have they still have the book depository museum, which should be used as a paperweight in the bottom of a freaking landfill somewhere, because it's a monument to the lies of the government and the Warren Commission, and why we even still have that. And that, like, we're all adults now. Can't we just talk about the fact that it wasn't a lone gunman? It wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. Nobody believes that story. Nobody with a brain ever did. But seriously, people, like, nobody's going to buy this kid was the guy. Oh, he was in a BlackRock commercial, but yeah, he just happened to be a lone gunman, registered Republican, so they say. And again, this is why, because I have a strong opinion, and I probably need to keep my mouth shut more than not sometimes. And so this is why I like to wait, and why I don't want to come out. Yeah, the accusations will not stand on 45. The Sister Diana, yeah. So, yeah, exactly. By the way, and on this show, I want you to know we're not Republican or Democrat. We are apolitical. And the reason is that's by design. It's not that we don't have an opinion. It's not that we don't have a vote, because we do have a vote. It's that I want to be, no mouth shutting, please. Okay, I'll keep talking. Threaten me with a good time. I want to be in a position to serve anybody. If Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, any of them called and said, I've had a troubling dream and I need to know what it means, I would love to be in a position to do what both Joseph and Daniel did, which was to broker a relationship with the Almighty God through dream interpretation. And so having the opportunity, whoever our leaders are in whatever position, good or evil, believe it or not, and a lot of people don't get this, there's an opportunity to speak the truth of God into somebody's life when they have a troubling dream. They're a leader. They can't find anybody that can answer their question, and you get the phone call. I want to be in a position to get that phone call. It's one of the reasons why I try not to be too vocal about my political affiliation or my political thoughts, because my job is to be able to advise the leaders that God puts in my path. And I don't want a leader saying, well, I'm not going to call him because he obviously doesn't like me. He likes the other guy. I want to be in a position to serve whoever that is. Now, again, this is something I'm just going to be candid with you. I've struggled with, because I have very strong opinions. My studies in college were political science, so I understand it more than most. And I've read way more books than most about the president, the presidency, war presidents, presidents in crisis, the President's Club, decision-making presidents, specifically to prepare for the job that we believe God has called us to, and that's to serve the highest office in the land with spiritual intelligence. And so we want to be in a position to do that. But let's open up with a word of prayer. That was a long initial monologue, dialogue with Janet here. And we have a couple of people in the back, by the way. If you have a Trump dream, a shooter dream, a attempted assassination dream of anyone, or a major national event dream that could talk about something happening or something about to happen, or even anything with the words trigger event, because I heard trigger event after this happened, please call in. We have room in the back office. We'll probably be able to get to everybody this week. Try to keep the dreams short. But what we want to do is we want to come together as a group like we do and begin to analyze what God is saying. This is a very important time in our history. And one of the things that we know is God is not silent on things like this. And so he speaks. He often speaks loudly. People may not be able to interpret that. And we want to do that as a team and as a group. And so let's do that. Leviticus 14:17, and of the rest of the oil in his hand, the priest shall put some on the tip of his right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the toe of his right foot, and on the blood of the trespass offering. Interesting. All right. Well, Father God, we thank you for the opportunity to hear from you in dreams. We ask for more dreams, more visions, more of the seer gifts, more of word of prophecy, word of wisdom, or word of knowledge, word of wisdom, and prophecy. And God, that you would be with us tonight, that you would have the right people at the right time, share the right dreams, God, and that every time you seem to coordinate the whole broadcast that we do, and you even have themes with it. And so, God, give us wisdom, give us grace, and give us favor related to attempts on the president's life and recent events, even as of last Saturday. Bless this time, excuse me, and give us wisdom and understanding. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, where are we? Today is the 25th anniversary of JFK Jr.'s death. That's interesting. My daughters heard Turning Back the Clock yesterday, corresponding with a word released by Veronica West. Okay. Well, let's bring Selena in. Selena, by the way, actually has been here multiple times. We love having Selena on, and her brother as a guest, but Selena works in security and personal protection. So it would be interesting. We would love to hear your thoughts about what happened Saturday with the incident in Butler, Pennsylvania, and any dreams or visions that you've had.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't watching. My Eddie texted me and let me know something had happened. So I went to Right Side Broadcasting because I could trust them the most. But my housemate had Channel 5 on, the mainstream media news, so I could compare what I was hearing and seeing between the two. And to my surprise, mainstream media at that moment was actually pretty much straight up telling what happened and was being accurate. So I thought it was strange later on that all of a sudden they started changing their tune. When I looked at the video of what had happened, my first thought was something doesn't look right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I started hearing about possibly, this is staged or whatever. And after a while, I thought they left him open. So, somebody really, it looked like a setup to me. There's just because I've watched plenty of other rallies and I've watched the security they've had, and they've always been right on, and nobody's ever gotten even close to him. So for this to happen, and based on what I saw, I remember one of the first times there was an attempt on Trump's life. They rushed Trump and pulled him off the stage, like really quick.
Instantly, yeah.
These guys were all leaving him on the stage, surrounding him with their own bodies, like, get him off the stage. Why are you still standing there when there's still some open, So I'm like, nah, somebody set him up. Something's gone wrong here. So then I started to hear more of the stories later. I'm like, yep, that's okay. So
well,
I'm sure
you have firearms training, right? You have firearms.
I've had some very basic, just to qualify for firearms.
So if I'm correct, it was an AR-15 that they used, allegedly that the shooter used. I don't know that to be a fact, but I've heard that. And wouldn't the bullet of an AR-15, especially at 100 yards, wouldn't it go straight through somebody if they were standing in front of the president? Now, obviously, the Secret Service probably has bulletproof vests and all of that, but I'm wondering why they didn't immediately move him, whereas they surrounded him and they covered down. Now, I know he was down and they had to get him up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was fine. He was smart enough to get on the ground right away, and then they all jumped on him. But when they brought him up, they should have immediately taken him off, not stayed there standing. They just looked like they were stumbling. Who are these people? I've heard somebody say that this particular security was temporary. They were temporary. They weren't his usual. And I'm like, well, that just makes more sense because they've never been so sloppy and incompetent. I've never seen his detail do such a poor job. So when they said it was somebody else's, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. So those were my thoughts on it. And I've always been convinced that God would keep him alive and he would be safe. I certainly didn't think that God would let his ear get nicked like that, but but after thinking about it for a while, there's some other dynamics I've heard other prophets talk about, but I don't get too far in that. But still, I was like, well, yeah, clearly God protected him, even though he got a bit of a scrape. My thought was like Job wrestling with Jesus and he came out with a hip out of place, and maybe this is his version of the hip out of place, because he has been wrestling with God and not being totally, in my opinion, totally okay, God, whatever you say. And so this could have been a humbling moment as well. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't concerned. I was certainly sad for the people that got hurt. It didn't have to happen. Just didn't have to happen.
Yeah. Well,
so anyway,
what do you have?
Okay, I'm trying to get the volume up. You guys can hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Okay. So this dream I had, I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time. I believe it was still 2020. So in this dream, I was a passenger in a shuttle bus. And
Hold on.
it was
my phone to take notes.
okay.
Yeah, I need a new piece of paper.
Shuttle bus. Go ahead.
Right. And you said that
I'm
was
kind
in.
of going from memory.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said it was in
That's okay.
2020.
I believe it was in 2020, and I was
Okay.
living in Portland, Oregon at the time.
Got it.
And so I was a passenger on a shuttle bus, and we were coming to an intersection, and the driver slammed on the brakes because there was a car that came from the other direction that wasn't supposed to be. So I was glad that we didn't have an accident. Then it changes, and I'm in a different place, and I'm standing on a property with a house on it. And my brother is excited for me, saying, "You got a house, Selena, you got a house." And I was stunned at how large the backyard was, because it was acres and acres of land. Then I'm inside the house with my brother. Our beds are in the same room. And I thought that was odd. So then I'm outside of the house in the neighborhood, and there's a huge, I couldn't tell if it was an apartment complex or just a really huge hotel. I don't know which one it was. I'm leaning towards hotel just because there were two huge fountains, fancy looking fountains in the front of this place. And the neighborhood is beautiful. There's homes around and they're not too close together. It's just a really beautiful neighborhood. Lots of space between the neighbors. So then I'm inside a lobby, and there's a room I'm going to go into to sign for my house. But before I walk in, I see Donald Trump come walking through the lobby all the way across to the other side of the lobby, and I could see he's very happy and content with a grin on his face, like he was proud to have been part of making this community happen or come into being. And of course, he was very nicely dressed in his suit and overcoat, always looking professional as usual. And that's the dream.
Interesting.
So you
Yeah,
need him. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I just was thinking recently when I was going back to the dream, Trump had talked about freedom cities and the cities that he wanted these cities to look like. And for me, what I saw in the dream was ideal for me. That would be a dream. I got a house that I didn't pay for in the dream. All I had to do was sign for it, and it was mine. And I got all of this acreage, and it's like, what am I going to do with all this? I don't even know. I've never had that level of prosperity before. And I know it's been prophesied that when he's back in office, I think the phrase God gave was radical prosperity.
Mhm.
So I thought,
Allie
I'm
wants to
sure-
know if you're going to be on Trump's security team.
I'm sorry, say that again. It broke up.
Allie wants to know if you're going to be part of Trump's security team. I would
Well,
take that
need a
as
lot of training before they do that. Of course, I'd be honored to.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'll take a bullet for him, no problem.
Wow. You won't have to dodge bullets. When the time comes, you won't need to. Trump will make it possible for people to be able to afford homes again. No more Federal Reserve. Well, that's interesting. All right. Well, let's talk about this dream. Okay, so the idea of being on a shuttle bus intersection, driver slams on the brakes. So I feel like this is obviously the sudden stop. And the sudden stop is what's the shuttle bus? I feel like it's something to do with the word shuttle. Obviously, somebody felt like that was related to money, wealth transfer coming. So also, besides prosperity, the ability to take care of yourself, homesteading to farming, ranching, home to business. Yeah, we thought of that too. Sign it, the sign of it. Interesting. The house reminds me of some inheritance with your brother, with Eddie. That's interesting. Also, when the year of Jubilee happens, return land to the rightful owner. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, so I think it's fascinating that you go from the shuttle bus to the house situation. And that you're in a hotel, but you're about to sign for the house. I feel like this is talking about the presidential selection this year. We're in a temporary state. It doesn't appear to be a very stable state for our nation, to be honest. Our leadership appears to be very, very sketchy and unstable at best. I mean, that's being kind, frankly. We can be kind, but also accurate. But the idea that you got a house with acres in the backyard, which to me represents like historic lands, parklands, things like that. More than a half hour to connect. Interesting. Avoiding a collision or avoiding a crash. How about avoiding a crash, Nicole? So
yeah,
maybe
there you go.
Maybe that's how it could be related to the economy and the market. I was like shuttle bus, but what is the avoiding the crash or the economy? Trump giving the land back to the people. Hi, matey.
You know, what I noticed is I was the only passenger on the shuttle bus. There wasn't anybody else but the driver.
Oh, really? Well, the shuttle bus, I think of when I think of a shuttle bus, I think of like airport parking, which is interesting because it takes you from one mode of transportation to another. It's a temporary mode of transportation even. It's going from a hotel to the airport or from your parked car to the airport. And you're going from your home into your car, parking your car, getting on the shuttle bus, going to the airport, getting on a plane, renting another car, going to like it. So it's in the midst of extreme transition. People don't ride shuttle buses probably on the daily. It probably doesn't happen very much that way. Oh, I like this scuttled. They heard scuttled. That's interesting. Have you seen stock market with the suspicion of Trump's return? Yeah. Wow. Hello, Little Jackson, Texas. All right. First plan to be scuttled. Shuttle buses are also free. That's a good point, Jeff. We appreciate that.
Well, certainly in 2020, Portland was a mess because it was one of those places that really got ransacked with Antifa and all that. And the amorous against Trump was incredible in that area. Even though we did have a lot of people who were supporters of Trump, I think a lot of them were still kind of not really putting themselves out there because
Yeah.
they were shooting people and wrecking things, and so but there was still a lot of support for Trump at that time, but it was such a chaotic time. Nobody
Well, I
knew
think
what
it's
was going to.
interesting too that you see this beautiful hotel with two huge fountains, and it's beautiful. And then Trump is walking through, and he's happy that he was part of making this community. So it sounds almost like Mar-a-Lago. And the thing that I would say about Mar-a-Lago is it's the house that Trump built. So if this represents this temporary place that we're in, about to sign for a house, represents the place that Trump built, or the community is the place that Trump built, and you're about to sign for a house in this community. Again, to me, it sounds like the presidential selection, and we can either be a part of, Biden's vision, obviously, or lack thereof, and or Trump's vision. And I think it's really interesting because it's, one of the things I noticed related to sports and politics is people in this country love to pick sides. We love to pick our team, and then we want them to go to war. And the more war and the more blood and the more arguing and screaming and stuff that happens, it's like the louder people cheer. But when we pick a president, we really have to think about what is good for the nation, what is good for our children. Divisiveness is not good for our children. Certain parties' policies, frankly, are not good. Like, look up cities, look up what Democrat versus Republican policies have done. And again, I'm not picking on people individual, because we want to be in a position to serve leaders of all persuasions. However, some people and some ideologies govern better than others. It's just an absolute fact. Look at crime rates, look at the economy, look at prices in certain cities and certain states in our nation, even in the last 4 years, and see what's going on. But I think it's interesting that both Trump shows up in the dream, and that you're in a temporary place about to sign for a house with a big backyard. I think the backyard is also reminiscent of, to me, it reminds me of Teddy Roosevelt and the national lands that he set aside, parks, the Department of Interior, all of that. But it also represents historically. I wish when people voted, they would look at history, that they wouldn't go based on gut feeling or based on identity politics. Guys, identity politics is hopefully dying a horrible, screaming death. Because if you vote a certain way because of the color of your skin, that I don't know of much that's more ignorant than that, to be honest with you. I love what Martin Luther King said. Let's evaluate people based on the content of their character instead of the color of their skin. But it's the same way. If you vote because of you go to a particular church, or because of this, like, do your research, find out what's biblically aligned, find out, and ask God, why are people afraid to do this? Ask God and say, God, who is your man in this hour to right this country? And if you have a problem with who God's man is, look inside and correct yourself. I love what Johnny Enlow says. He says, you know what? You didn't get to be a prophet in the Old Testament and miss Cyrus. And he even talked about people that have backed up on certain words that they had about who was going to win the last presidential selection. And he said, a lot of those people that backed up, if not all of them, their prophetic ministries are not thriving, because you can miss things and you can make mistakes in hearing God, but understanding who God's appointed and anointed man for a certain hour is not something that you just miss, Sure. And so anyway, if that offends you, get over it. Forgive me. I try to get along with people, but I just don't. Sometimes we make it difficult. So that's all I'm going to say. But I do believe that God has a plan moving forward. I do believe the best days of this nation are ahead. And I do believe that God has some things to say, even in the midst of potential tragedy. And we can look at them and collectively and say, God, what are you saying in this time? So I do believe that we have a selection coming up. I do believe that it's going to affect the legacy, the lands. And I believe that certainly different people could have a part of either building a community or building back horribly. So let's take a look at what paper we decide to sign. There was a dream in 2020 that came out, and I think it was Nancy Pelosi was trying to get this Christian person to sign this paper. And I think maybe Hillary Clinton, or I don't know, Biden or somebody was there. And they were like forcing, like they were torturing, you have to sign this paper. And what I felt like it was getting the church, in particular, the prophetic ecclesia, to sign on board and say, yeah, I guess that's the way the selection went. Even though it was clearly, the facts didn't ring out that way, but it was like getting the church to sign and agree with what the media, the false prophets of the day, are declaring. And so we have to be in a very, very, very interesting position to discern what the will of the Lord is. And if God is saying, this is my man for this hour, that just because the media wants to say, oh, this is the way it went, they've been wrong. The last 4 years, they've been wrong probably 105 out of 100 times. I literally would not trust them with information of how to help my kid with a cold. Literally, at this point, I wouldn't trust the media at all. And so if we're making decisions based on political pressure or based on peer pressure, based on other Christians or other people who don't do their research, who don't hear the voice of God, and who are trying to move us along because they want us to get over it, like they did the last time, don't let it happen. Don't you dare let it happen. Don't play small, and know that you can hear the voice of God directly and he can speak to you. And don't back up on what God tells you, whatever that is, even if it's hard for other people to hear, even if it's difficult information. So that's what I would say about your dream. Know what you're going to sign or co-sign on, and the land that you're going to inherit based on your signature.
Yeah.
Cool dream.
Of course, I know there's also going to be a restoration. God is restoring, giving us back what belongs to us. I mean, I don't even know how much I've been stolen from. I'll know when God gives it back.
Can I make a comment on that? Because the one thing that I also heard, because you were kind of puzzled, like, why am I in the same bedroom as my brother? And it made me think of, when you're young, you're little, and you can share a bedroom with your brother or your, and it's not a big deal because it's a time of innocence. You're not really thinking, there's nothing perverted about it, because you're innocent children. And I just saw in this house, there's like a return to that, to a time where things weren't so corrupt and perverted, and almost a return to innocence, which of course, makes me think of, when JFK was assassinated, many people believe that was like, the day the music died. Like, that's the day that our nation lost its innocence, was that. So it just made me think of all that. So it's a return to, I don't necessarily want to say nostalgic, but just a return to a day that was more innocent, that was more pure. So just a thought on that. Well, and the whole idea, if you can sleep next to your brother, you're in a state of peace with him. You're not fighting,
Yeah, that's actually been literal in our adulthood. We're actually sharing the same room.
It's not till we get older and we're like, I should be sharing a room with my brother, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's also indicative of how close. Well, we're on the same page when it comes to spiritual things and political things, and we've been through this craziness like everybody else together, understanding and God and understanding what's been happening over the years, whereas some other folks in our families, so we've just been together on this journey, and I think we're both going to receive that reward of faith and listening to the prophets, being obedient to God, paying attention, praying, warring in the Spirit, and all of that. So there's been just this partnership between he and I tend to think that's why also that's there as well. And we're not against each other. We're together. We're moving forward. We see it. We have the vision. So thank you.
Sure.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on, Selena. We always love seeing you. Have a good one.
Yes.
Okay, you too.
Take care. Wow. We got a lot of mileage out of that dream. I think that's really good. All right. let's get into. We got a handful of people in the back, so let's do like 5 or 10 minutes with each one and see how many people we can get through here. Maria, how are you?
Hi guys.
Good to see
Okay,
you.
so this is a Trump dream, not a warning, but Trump is still in the stream. I dreamt that I saw a little young girl sitting on Trump's lap, and then I'm seeing the bottom of Trump's feet with the bottom of with a woman's feet. The dream starts going from head up till I can see their faces, and I'm seeing that the woman standing next to Trump is me. I'm also happen to be wearing one of Melania's dresses. We're both standing next to each other. It looks like we're looking over some hilly or mountainous area.
You're looking over what?
Either a hilly or a mountainous area. We're looking over, I mean, it looks like we're either on a hill or some mountain.
Okay, interesting.
Can you go back? You said you saw the bottom of something and then you kind of cut out a little bit so I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it starts out the dream is showing both his feet and the woman's feet.
Like the tops or the bottoms?
It's going from the bottom up, like it's showing from the feet to the ankle and so on, until I see the faces, and I'm seeing that the woman that's standing next to Trump is me, and I'm wearing one of Melania's dresses.
Interesting.
So it's almost like you're scanning from his feet all the way up to his face.
Yeah,
is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's
okay.
it. That yes.
Then how long do you stay focused on his face, or is that when you realize that you're Melania?
It was. I would say it was long enough for me to be able to see that it was me standing next to him.
What was that big clunk?
Okay. And then you're looking out over the mountains.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was a mountain or a hill. I mean, we're looking over something.
Interesting. Lincoln's little girl. Lincoln didn't have a little girl, but when you look up Lincoln's little girl, it has to do with the idea of the little girl probably named Grace that sent him a letter basically saying, grow your beard. Grace Bedell. So I think it's interesting. I'd love to hear more of what your thoughts were on Lincoln's little girl. Jade. But so was Trump your father? Was Trump your father in the dream?
No.
Okay. So you were the little girl originally sitting on his lap, and then you saw his feet and then your feet, and then you're standing next to him and you're in Melania's dress looking out at a hilly or mountainous area.
Actually, I didn't know it was going to be me until the scanning went up, and I saw our faces.
Okay.
Yeah. A view from standing in their shoes from the high places. I like this. Standing next to him or being close could represent a call to spiritual intelligence. Particularly the idea that you're looking at a hilly or mountainous area represents the idea of a high place as a high vantage point, overwatch, watchman on the wall, that kind of a thing. So I think it's interesting that there may be something here related to, high places, a view of standing in their shoes. Have you ever felt called like you had a calling to leaders or to stand before kings, as they say?
Let's see. I did in my home church. I did one time have a calling to had a calling to intercede, to do intercessory prayer.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That does make sense.
Hmm.
That makes a lot of sense because it's the idea of standing in someone's shoes or standing in their stead, standing in their place. So yeah, hidden places is what I heard. Trump is sort of a father figure to us all. Yeah, there's a story I have about dreams and even an incident or two that occurred related to Trump being the father of the nation. So yeah, I think that's interesting. A lot of people, you know, if you don't like that, check your heart. Um, you know, personally, I think maybe some year we could have a president that runs solely on the basis of rescuing trafficked kids. Like, guys, we've done crazy, crackpot, absolute idiots running the White House, tanking our country, destroying our economy, letting anybody across the border that they can, having the most horrible, most divisive policies in the history of mankind. And we've survived as a nation. So if the only thing, if the whole country went to hell in a handbasket, but we rescued kids and ended human trafficking, I think it'd be worth whatever we went through in those 4 years. Now, again, it's not a all zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be that that's the only thing that they could do. But I almost wish somebody would run just on that platform alone. Look, I'm going to get the kids back. Yeah, we'll have an economy and we'll have a country, but my goal is not gas prices or saving you money on taxes. My goal is securing the future of our children. And I will get the kids back no matter what. And I will use the full weight and resources of the sovereignty of the United States government and its military and its law enforcement to end human trafficking. And let's throw like fentanyl and drug trafficking in there too within our borders, and to save and secure the posterity of our next generation. If somebody would run on that, couldn't we all just cross party lines and support a candidate like that? And it's interesting because if you look up the record of this president and past presidents related to human trafficking and you want to know how to vote, that'll tell you. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you see the little girl with Trump, and there's been so many memes and images and even stories about what Trump has done for children and rescuing kids and and you know, and what his record is in this area. And I think, you know, if we don't have our children as a priority, what are we doing? Are we doing this for low gas prices? Are we selecting a president based on based on the idea that they're going to lie to us and say, I can get you free college when the Supreme Court has ruled that they can't? Like, what are we doing? Is this all about money, about getting out of debt, about having lower taxes? Like, these are the arguments of what they yell at back and forth. Foreign policy. How much money should we send to the Ukraine? What should our policy be? But who's talking about securing the legacy of our nation and the next generation? And I don't hear that a lot. And I think your dream is talking about that. And I love that it is.
Amen.
Amen. All right. I'm going to post the link again, Starsha, for you. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate everything.
Thanks for allowing me here.
Say again?
Take care. Have a good night. I said thanks for allowing me here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being on. We always enjoy you, Maria. Take care.
Take care.
All right. Wow. Even as a wife, God says they are one, so praying for and supporting the wife is absolutely important. Yes. Yes. Pray for 100%. I agree. Concerned American, are you there?
Hey, good evening.
Hey, man. How are you?
I've been better. Doing well, though. I just want to mention something about this past weekend. Like, I went through, excuse me, I have an injured rib, but I went through an emotion of a roller coaster of emotions. First, when I seen that, first thing was anger.
Mm-hmm.
I saw President Trump was okay, and then the first thing on my mind is what happened to the shooter? Is he dead? Did you shoot him yet? And I'm processing that in my mind, and then I was filled with sorrow. God spoke to me. He's like, you are celebrating another man's death right now. Mm. And then I'm start thinking like, yeah, well, and they try to kill our president. I try to justify all these different thoughts in my mind. So then what happened? Like the first time I started praying for President Obama, it was a year before he left. And despite of what I feel about the man, he made me sick. Like, doesn't matter. I started praying for him. I said, please, Father, do something for this man so he can realize that he can help our country, make him do something better. And then that's when we got President Trump. So first thing I did, I haven't watched any of Joe Biden's stuff. It's hard for me to watch him. But I started watching him after this incident happened, because what I feel is if we all hate, if you love a man or hate a man, there should never be a celebration of death. And if we go towards with Joe Biden in office, and if we retaliate, and then think about the worst administration in office and being in martial law with them. So I'm asking you, just pray for the man for a peaceful exit. You don't have to like him, because, and like you were saying with the children, how are we going to save any children if if Joe Biden gets assassinated and we go into martial law or anything crazy happens, then they're never going to focus on the children. So, and that's the whole point. Like, they're torturing children and making money off of it, and then I'm over here celebrating because the shooter got his head blown off. So just wanted to put all that into perspective and pray for these leaders, pray for them to do what's right. But besides that, I have a really quick dream. What I believe is I think it's a vision of the future. So I'm in uniform. I'm pretty sure I'm an officer, and I'm assisting with search and rescue. Everything's like dark orange, like there's fires all around me, but I can't actually see the fire. I'm working off somewhere in the distance, but it's just like orange glowing, like the city's on fire. I get relieved, I'm off, and the next scene comes in. I got my cover off. I got my shirt unbuttoned, and I'm walking with who I think is my wife and a small family. Like, there's a couple, maybe 2 or 3 babies, and me and a lady, and we're walking together. She's carrying groceries. I'm helping her with the groceries. And then all of a sudden, a satellite just falls out of the sky. It's a big helium balloon with a satellite connected to it. And I said, see, I told you, satellites aren't real. And then there's a guy who is working in uniform, and he like tries to check me. He almost lifted his gun up at me, but he's seen I outranked him. And I was like, don't believe everything you see on TV. And do you feel like we're lost in space? It was like, and I tried to like explain my version of it. Then I got woke up. But while the balloon was falling, it was in front of the moon, so you could see it like being outlined right in front of the moon. It passed in front of the moon. It was a huge satellite, a helium balloon, and it crashed to the ground.
Wow.
And that happened in between spring and summer of 22.
Okay. Interesting. You know what that reminds me of is what was the show? Oh, the Truman Show.
Oh, yeah.
Truman Show with Jim Carrey, where like the light falls and he realizes his whole entire world is fake, and he didn't know it the whole time, and like everybody else was in on it. And there's multiple things that people have said related to this is going to be the greatest show on earth, or enjoy the show, or we're in a simulation, or whatever. And this is one of the main reasons why I have chosen to spend my time and all day, every day, and to build an organization, to teach people how to hear God, to build an intelligence agency, all related to hearing the voice of God through dreams, is because there is so much deception in the world around us that, and people will accept this at its head, but they won't go down the rabbit hole, to the point that I question almost everything. And people are like, well, yeah, I question maybe Biden's a guy wearing a mask. Maybe the indictments aren't real. Maybe everything you see isn't real. If the only source that you have of information, which is 99% of everything you see, is the media. And it's funny because when you check people on this, they're like, well, I don't get all my news from the media. Really? Well, how did you hear about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania? Facebook, Twitter, Fox, CNN, Right Side Broadcasting, like every single thing you think you know about what happened Saturday, you got from the media. Every single thing? And what if the lie is so big that they don't know it's a lie? Because I think there can be, I believe in the idea that there can be, and perhaps are, good people in media. I just think mainstream media is at this point totally and entirely demonic. And I don't trust any of it. And I don't care what banner they have. I think it needs to be burnt to the freaking ground, period. And I think God is doing that through social media. I think it's one of the reasons why they're yelling so loudly and they're hoping to be relevant, and their companies that are bleeding capital and they're losing anchors and their CEOs are quitting and they're being propped up by DEI specialists that are trying to keep the propaganda machine alive, because that's all it is. It's not news. It's not truth. It's not benefiting the United States of America or probably any nation in the world. At this point, it's the sideshow and it's the donkey show. And it's, and most of us are key to that. And I think people can say yes and amen to that, but like, how far are you willing to go? Like, it's interesting because when I talk politics with family members even, and they'll say, well, I know Trump is this, or I know Biden is this. And well, how do you know? And then they get mad. Well, I don't get all my news from the media. Okay, well, then where do you get it from? Who do you know that knows either of them? Do you know anybody that's ever met either of those people? No. Okay, so everything you get comes from third-party sources that you don't know if they even know what the heck they're talking about. I'm networked enough where I do know people that know these people. And I know people that have worked closely with, or been at the homes of, or been in Air Force One, or been in the Oval Office, and been in the residence, all these different pieces, multiple people, probably 20, 25 people across a broad swath that have met these people, that have worked hand in glove with these people in DC, that have represented these people, that have talking points for these people. And so a lot of the information that I have is based on personal experience and relationship. And so I think it's really interesting, the idea that the satellite falling out of the sky, because again, I also think of Elon Musk, and I think of what does he call his star something? What is his satellite network?
Calls it Starlink, but even Elon Musk admits that they can't penetrate the firmament.
That they can't what?
Penetrate the firmament. He knows it. It's the waters above.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard him admit that. You got a link for that? I would love to see that.
Send it to you.
Yeah, that's. By the way, I saw that he came out and decided to support one of the Trump political action committees at the tune of $45 million a month.
Yeah,
I saw that too.
and just what he's doing in actually the fight against censorship and the price that he's paid personally. Again, the thing that was really struck home with me on this last Saturday is it's like, and I believe it was a God conversation. It hit me with a darker conversation than I think most of us are willing to look at. And my thought is, what if his head was tilted a half an inch? As snipers in the military, we know that as a pink cloud, like you would see his head explode. That's it. There would be not much left. God forbid a million times that happened to any political figure. But what if it did? Now, I know a whole lot of people would be really, 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 really upset. And people would probably be ready to go to war and do this and do that. But my question is, by the grace and favor of God, probably alone, that man's life was spared. He's in the fight. He's willing to put himself on a stage and literally take shots. Like he got shot because of what he believes in getting this country righted for the American people. What will you do? What will I do? The idea of pray. Of course, yes, also pray. I had an intercessor check me on this. I'm called to pray, and I'm never, ever, ever saying don't pray. But I'm saying prayer does not absolve you of the responsibility of personal and or civic action, period. During the Revolutionary War, there was a third of the country that did nothing. There was a third that supported the crown, and there was roughly a third that joined the Continental Army. The other 2/3 are useless, and in my opinion, do not deserve their freedom. If they were either treasonous, yeah, I'm sure that's what they wanted. It was a civil war done. If they were treasonous or they did nothing, They don't deserve to be called a leader. There's a lot of pastors. I love pastors. I've worked with pastors for 20 years, funded churches all over America. I love pastors. But if you're a pastor telling your people to just pray, get the heck off your stage and give up the microphone. Now, if you're an intercessor, you need to pray. You don't need to just pray. You need to also pray. But you need to pray, you need to decree, you need to declare, you may need to organize, you may need to get groups of people together. But the idea that we just pray and somehow this absolves us of the responsibility, to me, it's like the social media warriors. Well, I got on and I posted my meme that says, this is my political opinion. And what do you want, a freaking medal? You think that's fighting? You think that's politics? You think you're out of your freaking mind. Like, when are you going to run for Congress? When are you going to do something? When are you going to put your life on the line and sacrifice for the legacy and the history and the future of your children and mine? When is that going to happen? Because thank God we literally dodged a bullet this last Saturday, because we would live in an entirely different nation right now. God forbid if that shooter's aim had been true. But you know what would remain? The question would still remain. What are you called to do? What has God told you to do? And I have never seen at any time in Scripture where the instructions from God, particularly in a dream or in any other form of spiritual intelligence, were just pray. They were also pray, but never just pray. And so what are we going to do in light of this? What are we going to do to take the fight to the enemy? This is a spiritual war for America. This is not black, white, Republican versus Democrat, rich versus poor, or every other manufactured divisive media tool to try to propagandize people to keep the pressure off of where the real corruption is. It's not what this is about. This is about what God wants to do in our nation and who's willing to stand up and literally take a bullet for the future of America and the prophetic destiny of this nation. You know, we are the most mission-sending nation on the planet in the history of the world. That basis alone, let alone the fact that God said in the Abrahamic covenant, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. There's arguably no other nation in the history of the world that's blessed Israel as much as we have. So people that are sharing this garbage about America is under judgment, go read what judgment is. It's in 2 Chronicles 7:13. And God owns it. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, and I send plague or pestilence upon the land. So it's judgment from God. It's not bad policies because we selected the wrong person. It's not high gas prices, and it's not inflation. That is not what judgment from God is. It's not my guy didn't get, and so I'm mad because it's like we didn't win the football game. That's not. It's fighting for our lives. It's fighting for our futures. It's fighting for the prophetic destiny of the nation. And who is going to stand in the gap and in the place that President Trump has chosen with zero reason to do it other than his love of country? To literally take bullets for us. Who is going to fill the White House if the White House becomes vacant? Who's going to be a part of the new administration and probably pay a price? I know people that were part of the last administration, and they paid a price, and they heard about it from family members and from other people and all of this, you know, and they paid a price. They were persecuted because of the stand that they took. Who's going to run for Congress? We need to wash out probably about, who was it? It might have been Julian Assange. That said, when everything's said and done, about 90% of Congress will be gone. And again, that tells you right there, it's not a Republican versus Democrat thing. It's a corruption thing. But I could go on and rant. But my basis for saying that would be the 25th Amendment alone. We have seen with a level of competency in the last presidential debate of our current member of the White House, the President's Club. And every second that Congress is convened, that they do not remove that person, they have knowingly and willfully given up the basis of any level of integrity that they have. and they have relegated their oath to support and defend the Constitution, because clearly that man is not in charge of his own faculties, let alone the United States government. So no matter what side of the presidential selection of 2020 argument you fall on, this guy, who's ever running the country, was clearly not somebody this side or this side selected, because the person who they say is running the country now can't find his way off the stage. And so every moment that we allow that to continue, our nation has been overrun and we are no longer a constitutional democracy. Why is nobody saying this? Why aren't people getting up and shouting this in the halls of Congress and refusing to leave the room until this is dealt with? I don't know. But that tells me how corrupt both sides are. That's my personal opinion. That was way more than you bargained for on this.
Well, I do think this dream was like really telling you what God's calling you to do in the situation that John's describing, because you said at the beginning of the dream, you were a high-ranking search and rescue. So you are searching and you are rescuing, and you are high-ranking. So he's saying that's who you are. That's who I've made you to be. And then you're willing to walk through the fire to rescue other people. You're willing to put yourself in probably some really uncomfortable situations, or, in this case, you're telling, your wife and your family, like, this is what's real and this is what's not real, which is sometimes really, that's an awkward place to be sometimes, but you're willing to put yourself in that position to point the truth out to people. So I in light of all that's going on and with the gaslighting and, are we lost in space because everything goes through the media? No, you're the one. God's saying, I'm appointing you to point this out to people. Like, don't believe everything that you see on TV, and even the question, why is the balloon falling? Why is the satellite falling in the first place? Is it even real? So that's what I see. This is kind of God again pointing out your calling to you. And I know you've had similar dreams like that in the past where he's pointing that out. You're willing to sacrifice yourself for other people.
Yeah, that's what I found too, and it's kind of like the part of the dream that I don't like is like I have to be like, see, I told you so. Am I still on?
Yes, you're on.
What about the part of the dream where you got a wife, man? Hey, that's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Wait a minute.
I love the fact that you're with two babies, because in so many of your dreams, there's kids. And so I know just getting to know you through Sim and through this, that, you are one of those guys, veteran. Thank you again for your service, paid a price to serve and honor this country with your life, put your life and your health on the line. And you care very deeply about the situation of the children being rescued. And in almost every one of your dreams that you shared, there's kids. And here you are again, search and rescue. Kids are there. But the other thing that I think is interesting is, like you said, I don't want to have to be the one to say I told you so, but what God is saying is you knew. You were right. In other words, I'm showing you things that other people don't get. They're not picking up what he's putting down. You are, because you're a spiritual intelligence analyst. You're preparing yourself for the future of what God has for you. You're hearing the voice of God. You're documenting your dreams. He's speaking to you loudly and clearly. And you're one of those people that are going to have like an Overwatch vantage point. You're going to be able to see stuff coming before it comes. You're going to be able to see. I feel like the satellite represents not only the networks of the world, but the lies of the media, because so many of our satellites are media related and or internet related and or GPS related and or spy related, surveillance related. So it's all about information. It's all about the transport of information is what satellites are all about. And you're able to say, look, this was fake. It was fake. It was always fake. And so I love the fact that you get it. It's almost like, and it's hidden in the dream. It's a nuance that you have to see. It's almost like God is saying, yes what he said. Like what you see is true. God is presenting that very clearly to you in the dream, but also emphasizing again your mission for your life, search and rescue, an officer, a commander, somebody in a position of leadership, and somebody even with a family and in a position of leadership and related to kids and possibly rescuing kids. So this is an affirmation of who you are. It's an announcement of promotion of where you're going, both relationally and leadership-wise, diplomatically, politically, whatever that looks like. But it's also God letting you know that the things that he is showing you are real and you're right. It's a powerful dream, brother.
Yep. And maybe there's a wife too. So there you go.
Definitely. Maybe there.
Good. I want to
We say yes and amen to your wife.
Yes, and amen.
And your wife is with you. Similar calling. I love that, Nicole. Yes. Yes. Always, man. It's always so good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Thank you, ma'am. It's great to see you.
Yes.
Guys, both everybody have a blessed week. Thank you, family. Peace be with you all.
All right. Take care, brother. We'll see you.
Yeah, that was a great dream.
Dawn, here's what it goes. Ash wants to be the best man.
Oh, Ash wants to be the best man.
Powerful thoughts and dreams. All right, Monica. I saw you were waiting. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. How are y'all?
Good.
So I had this short vision, and it was Saturday morning, and I was having my quiet time, and then after a while of that, I felt like I was sitting in a big comfortable chair where I'm a recliner that I usually when I have my prayer time or a lot of time. So anyway, then I felt like God said, relax, lean back, and get ready for the show. And then I started seeing President Trump. Then I'd see Eric, President Trump, Eric. It went back and forth like that. And then a couple of times I saw Melania. And then it went back to seeing President Trump and Eric, going back and forth. And so then after that was over with, I thought, wow, something big maybe is going to happen. And then I started thinking, well, maybe Eric's going to be in the administration, the new administration. I thought that. And then I thought maybe even vice president at some point. I thought, well, that sounds kind of way out. So anyway, all that. And then, of course, we know what happened, later that day. So.
When did you have the dream?
Saturday morning.
Wow.
Well, it was a vision. It was a vision, short vision.
Yeah. So it was all about Trump and Eric, Trump and Eric, Trump and Eric, Trump and Eric, and then Melania was in it as well.
A couple times, yeah, and then it repeated Trump and Eric.
Anybody else? Did you see Barron or Don Jr. or Bonka or anybody?
Just those three.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. I feel like Eric will succeed his father. There's a lot of speculation about Eric, and I had the privilege of meeting Eric. And he just seems like such a seasoned, definitely a person of stature. He's very tall. He presents himself incredibly well. Very much a people person and a family man, but by all appearances, by what I've seen and heard about him. Eric was on at the RNC. He was the one that cast the vote to nominate his father, which, by the way, if you didn't know, Trump got the nomination of the Republican Party. But yeah, it's interesting. There's been words about actually Eric being surrounded by a group of prophetic people that can provide intelligence based on dreams and prophecy. And more than one person has, multiple people have sent that to us, which we would love to serve President Trump and his family and any member of his family in that capacity in any way that we can. In fact, that's what we've been training for the last 5 years. So I think it's interesting that it's back and forth. One of the things that when people talk about, like the words of Kim Clement, Trump would be a trumpet, and we suddenly got an echo. How did that happen?
Just a short time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The idea that Trump will be a trumpet. And we've done a dossier on Trump related to dreams, and we had at least 45 dreams in that. But we have hundreds of dreams about President Trump at this point. May be the largest collection or repository of dreams related to President Trump that exists, as far as I know, anyway. So it's really super interesting, though, that one of the questions that I've asked our team, because it's easy to get blinders on and to get into cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance. And if we see Trump in a dream, people can be, I always use this example, you can be riding the back of a flying unicorn with a flaming sword in its mouth, fighting a killer whale and having a dragon behind you, and you're on with Trump, and the only thing you'll get out of the dream is I'm supposed to work with Trump. Like, why would you think Trump is literal when clearly everything else around you is not? And so my question is Trump Trump? Very important question, by the way, if you ever have a dream, is Trump Trump? And a case in point that I would use is if God wanted to illustrate a renegade, a political figure that thought for himself, wasn't bought and paid for, wasn't controlled by special interests, was a billionaire, didn't kowtow to the party, and in fact, ticked off members of both parties because he wanted to do away with political corruption. Before Trump, how would God represent that? Because you could go back almost 100 years in this country and not find a president like that. I mean, the closest one might be Teddy Roosevelt, but he was pretty beholden to the certain party machines. So is Trump a figure in a dream of God saying there's going to be a president or a string of presidents? And of course, another way of looking at that is, when we see Trump in a dream as president, could that be one of his sons or daughters? Could that be somebody? Yeah, Andrew Jackson. And yeah, I agree. I agree with Kimberly. Lincoln is really the example. But Trump's not even controversial compared to Lincoln. If you study Lincoln, as much as people love Lincoln, everybody hated Lincoln, like everybody. The Republicans, the people in his own cabinet, and the Democrats, of course, but they were still part of the country. And then there's the whole half of the country that quit because he won the election. So super fascinating. But if God wants to present an image of a president that will fight for the people, that will disregard political affiliation and do the right thing, consequences be damned, if I could say that. And he will go to the nth degree to free oppressed people or whatever. Again, you got to go all the way back to Lincoln to see that. But how would God represent that in the modern era? Because most of us don't even know our history about Lincoln. We don't know who he was. He had a 26% approval rating. That's lower than anything Biden's ever had, as far as I know. Certainly lower than anything Trump ever had. But I just think it's interesting that could Trump in a dream as president represent Eric, Don Jr., Barron, Ivanka, anybody else? Could it represent, one of his children? Could it represent Melania? Could it represent? But because we don't have a grid, because we're thinking Donald John Trump, then we're thinking this is what it has to look like. And so anytime you have a Trump dream, I think it's interesting. And for this dream specifically, because God seems to be juxtaposing Trump Sr. and Eric, and it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then the mom comes in. Well, it's not. I don't think Melania is Eric's mom. She's Barron's mom, right? So it's interesting that then Melania comes in.
Right.
All three are named Trump. So what does that look like? Could Melania run in future years? I don't know. Eric, I think Eric may be the most likely, other than Barron. We don't know Barron. I mean, Barron's a very young man at this point, but he's very much compared a lot to JFK Jr. and it could be the most likely successor of a political dynasty if one exists. Is that the will of God? And when they say 2 Trump terms, of people that have felt that they've heard God say 2 Trump terms, I'm not saying that. I'm saying people that have felt that. Could that be 2 people named Trump? Or does that mean Donald John Trump? This is why we do spiritual intelligence. This is why we get to the vernacular and the granular, and we press in to say, God, you gave me a dream about Trump. Is that Trump? Is he president? Is that in the future? Was that in the past? What does this mean? And and could it be something else? Could it be Eric? Could it be Baron? Could it be any number of things? So I like that God is comparing the two. And I think it's also interesting, J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio that's been picked now as his running mate, because he's a young man. He's, I think, 39 years old from my home.
39.
Yeah. And
And
so
I think I heard Eric say recently, when somebody asked about his father's, pick for vice president, compared him, he said, yeah, he's real close in age to me. And that kind of stood out in light of, the vision that I had.
yeah, that's really cool. Well, sweet. Well, I like this. I like this dream, and I think it's interesting what it's saying. Yeah, everybody likes JD. Not everybody, but yeah, I think it's an interesting dream, and I think there's a give and take. There's a back and forth. What that means. Let me just say this real quick, because I think we get this confused. I did for a long time. I got this confused. When I think of prophetic dreams or prophetic words, I think of wanting to know the future before it happens. That's not necessarily how prophecy or prophetic dreams work. So a lot of time is spent thinking, can we predict the future? Again, Saturday's event, an attempted assassination. Could we have predicted that this would happen and provide a warning to better secure the president? It's a great question. It's a question that should be asked in any intelligence briefing related to the events of Saturday. Absolutely. But what if God's vision for why he gave somebody a dream was different? What if you're looking back from the vantage point of 2024, all the way back in biblical history to the birth of Jesus as Messiah, and then even back a couple hundred years further to the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah, and I forget what it is, 57 or whatever messianic prophecies there are. And it's interesting because some of them are covered in dreams in Matthew 2, when he says he appears, the angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream, and he says, go to Egypt. And then it says, so the word of the prophet could be true. Out of Egypt I called my son. And then he calls him back, and then he says, go here. And then he says, go to Nazareth. And so there's 2 or 3 other prophecies that are fulfilled in the fulfillment of the dreams in Matthew 2, which is another reason why we believe dreams are the gold standard of revelation versus prophecy. Not that it's a contest, but prophecy in the situation of Matthew 2 is used as confirmation for the direction given in the dream. So I think that you can't underestimate what that means. But the back and forth, I think, is really interesting, because it could be a multi-generational legacy of the name Trump, and it could be a father-son legacy that's being passed on. And then there's something related to the component that Melania brings in. But I think it's a very telling dream, and I thank you for sharing it.
One other point, I don't know if you noticed, but right before I went into the vision, I felt like God said, relax, lean back, and get ready for the show. And you think of how, that's been on TV over and over again, what happened, and fortunately what didn't happen. But I didn't know maybe there was a significance of that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. There are several people I've seen out there. Derek Johnson, one of the foremost that I've seen. I don't spend a whole lot of time on X or Twitter. I listen to very few other news outlets, but there are people that are pontificating that this was somehow something like you said. I don't know. I think it's dangerous to say that,
I'm not necessarily. I'm sorry.
Dangerous.
I don't necessarily mean that it was pretend. Right. I wasn't going down that road. Yeah.
Right.
But I think I've heard a little bit of what you've said too. Yeah.
I would consider the possibility that anything is possible. I'll say that. I don't like to speak to things that I feel ignorant on. I have not studied enough of the footage, the situation. I wasn't there. I haven't interviewed people for me to make a comment. Now, this is unlike most media pundits. So don't get mad at me if I don't state my opinion, but there's too many crackpot people out there saying every darn thing that comes to their mind, and usually it's nothing in their mind. And again, I'm pretty harsh on the media because they're the lying prophets of our time. They're knowingly and willfully partnered with propagandists that want to destroy the nation. And that's been proven over and over and over again. And if that doesn't resonate with you, I would challenge you to do your research. Probably most of the people that are hearing this on this show recognize that that is being the truth. But that said, it is possible for us to be deceived. And that's why I like to go into the dreams to hear what God has to say versus what man's opinion is on the media. So I do think it's a very interesting point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Saturday morning, I texted my friend that I felt strongly it is very quiet right now, and I described as we have reached the top of the roller coaster hill, the clicking up, and we are at the pause. Wow, that's interesting. See, that's the kind of spiritual intelligence that's, again, you can't plan a meal on that or even a week, let alone a national security event or prevent one. But I think it's interesting, and I think God gives us clues. What are your thoughts, Janet?
Well, just in general, I was just thinking about her vision. It's like, he was telling her, like, sit back, relax, because he's showing almost the legacy that he's building, with the faces going back and forth. I know you used that word too, but, just that thought of, like, don't stress, don't be anxious, because I got this and I'm building something. You said, the whole idea with picking J.D. Vance, is interesting too, because I do wonder, I'm kind of speculating, but I do wonder if that's part of the legacy that the Lord is building, that through Trump, because Trump chose him, but he was, so I do wonder if he is part of that legacy as well. So just because he's about the same age as Eric, and so it's just interesting that he was showing her that, like, it's almost like, just chill, don't worry about it, I got this. Like, he's gonna at least live long enough to build a legacy, right?
Yeah.
So don't worry about it, or don't worry about what you're gonna see on TV.
Yeah,
so
that's interesting.
Anyway,
well, cool. All right, well, let's do a few more
okay
before we end here. Sorry. Cheryl,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Well, I have a dream of Donald Trump, and I'll just make it short and sweet because I don't have it written out in front of me. But it was about a year ago. I actually sent it into Dream Life Decoded. It was the first thing I sent in.
Sweet.
So I was at some kind of fundraiser for Donald Trump, and there was green. It was summer. There was grass, like a green grassy hill on the left-hand side, and a building. I went in, and I didn't have a ticket to go into the banquet part. So I sat in a bench right outside the door, and it was like a white tablecloth kind of a fundraiser banquet, or like a pre-rally banquet or something. And he was standing in front of everybody talking, and he had a normal suit on and everything. And then someone inside the banquet shot him, and he fell down, and then he got back up, and everybody was running out past me. And well, right before that happened, I was waiting because I couldn't get in. So I went to the building next door, and there was, it was like a gift shop of some sort. And there was people in there like wearing Kentucky Derby hats and just sort of milling around. And then I walked outside, then back in. That's when everybody started streaming out of the doors. And, but I saw, I guess, even though I was outside, I could see him getting shot on the inside. So, but he was fine afterward. But yeah, it really, I mean, I can remember, even though it was a year ago, I can remember it pretty detailed. But that's the main parts.
Wow, this is really interesting. I think it's, again, as we analyze dreams, we want to hear from the Holy Spirit. And so, Nicole heard grassy knoll. That thought came to my
So did
mind
I.
too, with the green grassy hill. The idea that it's a fundraiser would be indicative, I believe, of an election year, which we are in. So that
Right.
could actually lead to somewhat of a call or even speculation on time frame. Obviously, politicians, leaders raise funding all the time, but they're in much more of a fundraising mode now, several months out from an election, than they ever have been. Summer, well, this occurred in July, I think is interesting. Green grassy hill. There was definitely green grass around the event in Butler. So I think that's interesting. White tablecloth. Inside, no banquet tickets. Okay, now we get to see things that appear to be, at first glance, not literal or figurative. And so, like not having a seat at the table, not having access to get inside, not having tickets, but still being in a position from the outside where you could see him getting shot and falling. And then the idea of being in another building or seeing these other people that have the Kentucky Derby hats on, I think to me just represents the idea of a mindset of wealth, celebration, and almost risk related to horse racing. Yeah, Kentucky Derby reference might be a nod to the words of Amanda Grace and the prophetic connection, and or Johnny Enlow too. So I think that it could be a point to that.
Well,
in the JFK narrative. Go ahead.
I was going to say, with the Kentucky Derby hats, I heard like right away, like we're off to the races. Like things are going to start to accelerate. We think things are going fast now. Like the race has begun. Like just hold on to your hat because here we go. So, that, especially because it, like, John was saying, it gives kind of reference to fundraisers. It's that season of fundraising so now we've had this incident. So it's almost like that was the pivotal event. Like I know you mentioned trigger event. You heard trigger event. Like that's the trigger event that's going to start this race to just accelerate, and the horses are off. So just again, watch the show. Let's see what interesting that you kind of get that whole idea. You're watching a race. I mean, it literally is a race, right? So
Yeah, it is.
So that's interesting, that whole aspect of it. But I was trying to figure out why you didn't have a ticket, and maybe it's not significant, but maybe that's how a lot of us feel, like we're kind of on the outside looking in without a ticket. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the ticket? Did you hear anything on? Or John, did you hear anything about?
Just access denied.
Yeah.
But I think what was super interesting is even from the outside, you saw what happened inside.
Yes.
But also the idea of an inside job. You were on the outside, but you saw what happened inside, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
I think it also represents proximity. You weren't in the room when it happened. And so it could be a level of distance. You probably weren't in Pennsylvania last weekend, or certainly in Butler at the rally. But yeah, I think it's an interesting dream. I think this could be one of those dreams that we'll figure out later, that we'll look back from a historical view of, and that's what this is. I believe this was a trigger event in multiple other dreams that we didn't understand. And so, we thought this was for 2020, like the dream today in a Coverstone with the Conestoga wagon. But we're like, could this be a trigger event that looking backwards now we can say, oh, this is this. We thought it could be this in 2020, but then it didn't make sense and it didn't come to pass. And so we're like, well, were we completely wrong? What we do is we go back and we do a postmortem on that dream. I've actually do a briefing with my team and say, here's how I got it wrong, because I said this was going to happen at this time. And now it looks a whole lot more like it's lining up for 2024 than it was in 2020. because it's all about the perturbations in the Democratic Party and how they're trying to flop and twitch and figure out who they're going to have as their nominee, and kind of in an internal war that's literally going on. It's going to be interesting to see how that convention unfolds in Milwaukee. But yeah, something about on the outside looking in and it possibly being an inside job. The white tablecloths. There's a lot there. This is one of those ones that we would want to carefully, because of the content of this dream. This is what we call an assassination dream. Somebody's dreaming about the president getting shot. We take these dreams very, very seriously. We look for confirmation. We search our entire database. We look at what prophetic voices are saying. Like, I can't tell you how careful we want to be with this information, because literally somebody's life could be at stake, as we saw Saturday. So is there something that we could perhaps do to warn, protect, raise the alarm, even pray, declare, be a witness to, be in the room, be, in the state 2 weeks before? I don't know. But God is telling us for a reason. We need to assume that it's more than just pray. We need to assume, and this is the way we take, that we're in a posture of action. What can we do? And intelligence as a whole, the intelligence community wants to prevent bad things from happening. We don't want to hear about them afterwards and have a post-mortem on how we could have prevented 9/11. They see that as a massive intelligence failure. Sometimes that's not the purposes of God in revealing a dream, though. So this is something we'd want to study more. But thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's a very important dream and very, very timely.
Thank you.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
All right. Take care, Cheryl. Starsha, you got a quick one? We got about 4 minutes.
Yes, it's pretty
All right.
quick. Yeah. So this actually, I had this dream like literally the day of. It was the morning on Saturday morning. I was in my old apartment, and Trump was coming over. It was me and my mother. We were cooking. He was coming over. He wore his typical blue suit with his red tie, but he looked very disheveled. His hair was messed up. His tie was all over the place. And so I told him just to sit down on the seat, that we were cooking hamburgers. So he sat down, but when he sat down, he kind of reclined on the chair, but looked like he fell. And I gave him the hamburger. He ate the burger, said, I wish it was good, but if this was a little more rare. And I looked at half of the burger and I was like, but it's bleeding. There's like blood on it. So I was thinking, how more rare could it get? The scene changed, and I was in a field, and it looked like a rally. It looked like a Trump rally. It just looked like a rally. And he was supposed to be speaking, and there was a group of people waiting to take a picture with him. And this guy had an umbrella, and he pulled back on the umbrella to open it up and put it in front of the people that he was supposed to be that Trump was supposed to be taking a picture with. And it had Trump's face on it in what looked like a bullseye. And all I kept hearing was, just take the shot. Somebody take the shot. And I thought they were talking about just take the picture. And that's when I woke up. And I had an uneasiness. I was like, why would I dream about Trump on that morning? And then later on that day, it didn't hit me until after when everything had happened and he had gotten shot in the ear.
Did we lose John? I think we did.
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, hey, I'm back.
Well, you're back.
I'm back. So it's interesting that you were at like a picnic kind of event and he was cooking out, grilling. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
But-
we were. It was actually my mother and I. We had cooked a hamburger for him. Yeah,
Oh.
and we had cooked a hamburger for him, and he ate it. He said it was good, but he wished it was a little more rare. But I looked at the half-eaten hamburger, and it had blood coming out of it. And then that's when the scene changed, and we were at like what looked to be a rally. We were on this green. He was supposed to be speaking, and a guy with an umbrella pulled back and opened the umbrella. It had his face on the umbrella, and he was supposed to be Trump was supposed to be taking pictures with some people. when he pulled back on the umbrella, the face looked like it was on a bullseye. And then all I heard was somebody saying, "Take the shot, just take the shot."
Wow.
And that's when I woke up. And it was that Saturday morning that had happened. And I shared that dream with a friend in the morning on
You're breaking up. Can you hear me?
my way to work. And I was like, it was the weirdest dream. And I just felt so uneasy with it.
Yeah.
I bet it really
Yeah,
freaked
I can
you out
hear you.
after-
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I bet it really freaked you out after later in the day when we
Can
saw
you hear
what
me?
happened. Yeah. Can you hear me?
It did. Yes, I can hear you.
Well, interesting. What are your thoughts, Janet?
Well, there's two things that really stood out to me. Because was it Trump that said, "I wish it was more rare," when he was talking about the hamburger?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I
he
kept
did.
hearing like that's because I mean, most likely this is probably not the first time someone has tried to kill him. I mean, and I don't know that for a fact, but it seemed like when he was saying that, he was referring to like assassination attempts. I wish this was more rare. I wish this was actually a more rare event than it in reality really is. That's what I kept hearing. He's just making a comment on, I wish this wasn't the state of affairs, but this is the way things are. Sadly, it is. Other interesting thing is, I was watching the rally, and because it was so hot there were literally people who had umbrellas at the rally. Well,
Wow.
and I even heard one of the commentaries was, "Wow, I can't believe they would allow that many umbrellas into
I can't believe
the
Secret Service
rally."
allowed it at all.
Yeah, because it would obstruct their view, possibly, if it was up too high. So I find it super interesting that you saw an umbrella in your dream, and it had his face on it with the bullseye. And I'm not going to speculate that was part of grand conspiracy. I would never do that, but I just find it super interesting. The detail of your dream is fascinating.
Yeah. I was
down to
pretty
the
shocked.
umbrella. Yes, down to the umbrella.
I didn't even know that. Yeah.
So that part of it is super interesting to me. So the Lord is definitely showing you what like that there was definitely a bullseye on him, and just the detail. That's what I found fascinating. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of speculation on Umbrella and Umbrella organization and the intelligence community in certain said programs, which may or may not, be discussed further. I don't want to get into the speculation of things like MK Ultra, because if God is saying that, and God has said things like that to me, and you go down a deep dive and you really understand what the purpose of those programs were and what their root was, it's fascinating. But it's, we got about 1 minute left for tonight. But I think your dream is ridiculously important. I love the fact that you had it on the day. And I love the fact of just the whole idea of rare and take the shot, and the setting of the umbrella. It sounds very, very peculiar. Again, wasn't enough to increase security or pull back the president from being in a situation where he was shot. But it definitely in a juxtaposition of all of the pieces of intel that we bring together and we see, could God be saying something further or something more? That's our job now. Our job wasn't to prevent. And it's interesting because God gives the intel, not us. And so we don't necessarily, though we use RFIs and we request for intelligence information, we don't necessarily get to pick, because we would all say, God, let me read the headlines of tomorrow's news every night.
Yeah.
And some people get it like that. Very, very few and very, very far between. And those that have even speculated on future headlines, a lot of times are wrong, because is God showing us the lies they're going to tell us or what's really going to happen? So I do think, like Arise and Shine said here, it's very, very eerie that you wake up, you have an uneasy feeling. It's the morning of, and later that day it happens. And so
Yeah.
these are the things that we need to be sensitive to, hearing the voice of God through dreams. These are the things you absolutely write down. And if nothing else at all, I want you to get from this, Starsha, that God is speaking to you clearly. He's speaking to you about
Mhm.
presidential events, about national level importance, and you may have a calling in spiritual intelligence. And in fact, I would like you to consider our spiritual intelligence mentorship in September, because people like Marion, like many people that we see on here, there's a reason you're attracted to this show. It's because it resonates with you, what God is showing you in your dreams, and you realize you're part of a community that God is speaking to as a group. And when we come together, we're stronger. We're stronger. We need people like you that get clear dreams and that want to press in and that want to hear from God. But a dream about Trump and take the shot at extremely wear and umbrellas the morning of, that's huge.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's gold.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure
Yes.
to have you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Well, guys, thanks for being on with us tonight. We appreciate the bravery and the courage of everybody that shared their dreams with us. We honor the voice of God through you. We love the fact that you're writing your dreams down, that God is sharing with you things particularly related to national level events. I would much rather talk about this than nightmares, because nightmares can happen anytime. And this is about something that's happening. This is one of the most significant presidential events possibly of our lifetime. And thank God that he spared Donald John Trump, because we would be in an entirely different world if the shot was an inch or so off. So thank God for his grace, his mercy, and protection. And do not ignore your dreams. If you're getting a dream that you believe is warning of a national level security threat, or a national something of national importance, whether it's terrorism or somebody's life is on the line, please send us those dreams. We have connections in all kinds of places to get warnings to people, whether it's law enforcement, federal law enforcement, Secret Service, or people in various administrations and people that are close to all kinds of leaders in high places. You don't want to be the one holding on to that information if God gave it to you, and it could possibly be a warning and help save lives. So thank you for being part of our community. Thank you, Janet. You did incredible.
Yes. Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being on tonight.
Sure. No problem. Thanks for having me.
It was good to share the stage with you.
Yeah.
And we appreciate it. And it's a lot. It's a lot to be on for 2 hours and to be in the hot seat. So I really honor you for your courage to be here. It's not as easy as it looks necessarily, but it's also not as hard as people think. So
Yes. It gets easier every time too, I think. You get
easier.
more, yeah.
Right.
You get a little more relaxed.
Well, thanks again, guys. And again, continue to write your dreams down. We honor the voice of God through you. We thank you for being part of our community. And go to dreamlifedakota.com to share a dream or to find out how to connect. I'm probably going to do several more briefings in this theme related to Saturday's event. And so if you haven't, log in at Dream Life Dakota and join our community. You can leave your email address and you can get notifications of lives, because a lot of time I'll decide I'm going to go live in 30 minutes. And I don't do it till I have all the pieces put together, but you're going to want to see those broadcasts and see what God is sharing through spiritual intelligence about the critical time that we're in this election year in our nation. So thanks again.
Yes.
And until next time, keep dreaming.